Ye give the separatists, those who disrespect our king, a colony, then act surprised when their descendants rebel.
How's it going? My name is Coach Thornberry. I'm a high school teacher from the U.S. state of Georgia. We started off looking at mercantilism and the transatlantic trade. Last time we looked at the southern colonies in detail, and this time we'll look at the New England colonies in detail. We are still looking at Standard 1, compare and contrast the development of English settlement and colonization during the 17th century or the 1600s. The exact standard is, explain the development of the New England colonies, including but not limited to, reasons established, impact of location and place, relations with Native Americans, and economic development. The 13 colonies can be divided into 3 regions. The New England colonies are the region to the north. The New England colonies consist of Massachusetts Bay, Plymouth, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. First, we will look at Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth. Let's look at a timeline for some context. In 1517, Martin Luther starts the Protestant Reformation. So before this, the Catholic Church had operated in tandem with the leaders of Western Europe. Whenever Martin Luther advocates to break away from the Catholic Church, there are parts of what is today Germany that join his religious movement. A couple decades later in England, the King of England, King Henry, establishes the Church of England and also breaks away from the Catholic Church. One big difference though is the Church of England still operated a lot like the Catholic Church. The church services were virtually the same as they were before. A growing movement inside of England wanted the Church of England to become more like a Protestant church. The most radical of these people were the Puritans or the Pilgrims. In 1620, Plymouth is established by the Pilgrims. In 1630, Boston is established by the Puritans. So, a religious group known as the Puritans disagreed with the Church of England's continued use of Catholic ritual and tradition and opposed the growing power of the English monarchy. Remember, the English monarchy was also in charge of the Church of England. So whenever Plymouth is established, King James II is the King of England as well as the leader of the Church of England. The Puritans wanted to purify the Church of England of its heavily entrenched Catholic traditions. So although the Puritans came to North America looking for religious freedom, they were not tolerant of other people's views living within Puritan society. So the 2 colonies that were born out of the Puritan movement were Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth. By 1700, they'll combine to create one colony called Massachusetts. Now let's keep one thing straight. Plymouth was founded in 1620 by separatist Puritans and are commonly called Pilgrims. Massachusetts Bay, or Boston, was founded in 1630 by non-separatist Puritans and are commonly called Puritans. Separatist Puritans wanted to separate from the Church of England altogether. They were done with it, they wanted to create their own thing, while non-separatist Puritans wanted to reform the Church of England from within. If you think about it, that makes those 2 groups pretty different in their end goal. So both these groups felt that they were less persecuted in the new colonies. Thus, these 2 colonies were founded for religious freedom. But keep in mind, neither one of these groups were tolerant of other religions. Using their influence and wealth, the Puritan leadership was able to acquire a majority share in a trading company. Using the trading company as a front, the Puritans moved their headquarters to the London Company of Plymouth to a new colony in North America. This is how many Puritans and their families immigrated to the American colonies in order to escape persecution. Before disembarking the Mayflower, the Pilgrims created and signed the Mayflower Compact. This document is important in the study of the early colonial period in that it was a pledge by the colonists to govern themselves through majority rule. The Pilgrims sailed on the Mayflower in 1620 with approximately 100 passengers heading for Virginia. They were trying to create a new location close to Jamestown in the new Virginia colony. A storm blew them off course, causing them to land a few hundred miles north of Virginia in modern-day Massachusetts. This group decided to stay in the undeveloped area and create a new colony called Plymouth. Native Americans were viewed by the Puritans as non-Christians who needed to convert to Christianity. In the beginning, the relationship between the Native Americans and the Puritans was based on trade and diplomacy. The Puritans did not openly embrace the Native Americans, but relied on them for help in difficult early years for survival. As the English population increased, so did the conflict with the Native Americans of the area. Again, this is all very similar to what we saw in Virginia. The Massachusetts Bay Colony was founded in 1630 by 1,000 non-separatist Puritans led by John Winthrop. Its capital was set at Boston. The Puritans tightly controlled the political and social structure of their community. Communities were ran using town meetings. Voting rights were limited to men who belonged to the church, and church membership was tightly controlled by each minister and congregation. Towns were ran as direct democracies, with each voting member having a direct role in the administration of the government. Even though Boston and the Massachusetts Bay Colony is the third colony established, it'll quickly become the largest in terms of population. The church was a central force in governing the community. Frequently, those who disagreed with Puritan ideology and practices were banished from the colony. The Crown asserted more control over the semi-independent Massachusetts in 1660 when the monarchy was restored. The next colony we'll talk about is Connecticut. Thomas Hooker was a Puritan minister who challenged the leadership of the Puritan Church in Boston. Hooker and his followers established the new colony at Hartford in 1636. Connecticut was the first colony to adopt a written constitution, the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, in 1639. A constitution is a founding document that establishes the rules of a state or a country. Connecticut's early constitution is an important precedent for the rule of law in the 13 colonies and what will become the United States. Connecticut was also the site of the Bloody Pequot War with the area's Native Americans in 1637. The colonists and their Native American allies won a decisive yet controversial battle at Mystic Fort, where over 400 Pequot men, women, and children were killed when the fort was attacked and burned by the colonists. The Pequot people were completely destroyed, either being killed or forced to integrate into other Native American groups. This can be seen as the first genocide in North America at the hands of Europeans. The next colony we'll look at is Rhode Island. Roger Williams was a Puritan minister who faced banishment with his teachings that emphasized the limitations of the church to control an individual's consciousness. Williams left Boston in 1636 with a few supporters and founded the Rhode Island Colony with its capital at Providence on the Narragansett Bay. Rhode Island was unique for its religious tolerance and tolerant approach to Native Americans. Anne Hutchinson was another colonist who was banished from Massachusetts. As a female who challenged the Puritan ministerial leadership, Hutchinson was brought to trial. She defended herself at trial against the famed John Winthrop. Although Hutchinson defended herself in an impressive manner, she was still banished from the colony. She too fled to Rhode Island with her family. Rhode Island was known for its religious tolerance and is an early foundation to religious freedom in the United States. In 1675, the last major war that threatened the existence of European colonies in North America took place. We call this King Philip's War. It was a war between the English settlers and the Algonquin tribes of the area. Some of these Algonquin tribes were united with the English colonists. The main Indian group that was fighting the colonists was the Wampanoag people, who were led by King Philip, or his real name, Metacom. The conflict originated as the Puritan community began to spread out from the Boston area and take more land from the natives. Think about the colonies of Connecticut and Rhode Island, expanding into native land. Also, some Algonquin natives had converted to Christianity. These people were called praying Indians at the time. These conversions upset some established cultural traditions. The war was exceptionally brutal for its time. The Algonquin people were removed from the region. The Wampanoag people, like the Pequot decades before, were eliminated as a people. As a result, large areas of southern New England were open to English settlement. If you really like learning about history and you're not familiar with King Philip's War, go down that rabbit hole. It's fascinating, just trust me. A larger proportion of the colonists died than in any other American war. King Philip's War is a fascinating, overlooked part of history. The last New England colony is New Hampshire. Originally a portion of Massachusetts Bay, the small settlements in the north eventually formed their own New Hampshire colony in 1679. The region had become somewhat more religiously diverse than the strict Puritan settlement of Massachusetts Bay, but for most of the colonial period, New Hampshire was majority Puritan. New England was marked by thin, rocky soil and a relatively short growing season that made farming very difficult. Plentiful forests and proximity to the ocean led New Englanders to eventually develop a thriving shipbuilding industry. Fishing, whaling, and commercial trade from natural harbors such as Boston became important economic opportunities for the region. New Englanders became the merchants of the colonies. New England-based ships were the carriers of colonial goods in the transatlantic trade. Of the 3 regions of the 13 colonies, New England was by far the most rebellious. In fact, the first shots of the Revolutionary War will take place in New England.
Boston's who sparked the flame and caused the revolution, and we lost our colonies.
I'm starting to say British stuff like that in real life, so I really might need to scale back. The main takeaway here is the New England colonies were very dependent on commercial shipping and trade. The southern colonies we talked about last time tended to be more agricultural and dependent upon slave labor. Next time we'll look at the last colonial region, the middle colonies. Until next time, keep it real and take it easy.